Hello everyone. I hope you all are doing great. So today in my video, I'm going to talk about a very important topic, which I always have seen based on my prior experience that most of the developers have little to no experience in this particular topic. Whenever I used to take interviews, it used to always start with either some questions on a very generic EDI stuffs or questions related to how do you do mapping, or maybe if someone has done some kind of business process development, then questions around business process development, right? But when we ask questions around B2B integrator administrative jobs, like for example, have you ever installed a Sterling integrator? Do you know what it takes to install a Sterling integrated application? Can you describe me the processes that you follow to install it? Can you tell me which version of Sterling B2B Integrator have you installed? Did you install it in a cluster or a non-cluster mode? Have you installed in a Windows or a Linux or an AIX version? What is the typical database version that you have used while doing the installation? Have you faced any challenges during installation? How did you overcome those, right? And most of the time I have got almost no response to this, considering the fact that typically the developers who have started working on this application, they have started either by just starting to create maps or maybe just doing some kind of production support in the existing environment, supporting the existing business processes or maps, doing small changes here and there within the existing maps and business processes, or maybe some new maps or BP development. But I have hardly seen folks who have real installation or administrative related experience. And which is why I thought this topic that I'm going to talk about today, which is about Sterling B2B integrated installation, will really open all of your eyes on how actually this application is being installed. What are the prerequisites that you need to consider? I hope this will be useful for you. And do let me know in your comment section if you have any specific questions around any specific steps that I am going to show you. And I will try to reply them as and when time permits. So let's get into it. So what I have done is I have created a virtual machine and I'm going to do a RDP connection to the virtual machine where I'm going to show you how to install Sterling B2B Integrator. The version that I have taken is 5.2.6.1 for our tutorial. I'm going to put my password and here we go, right? So this operating system which I have taken for this installation is Windows Server 2012 64-bit, okay? And I'm actually going to do a non-clustered single node installation. Now, before we install Sterling B2B Integrator, we need to make sure that we check the specific version related documentation which is out there available in Google and check the prerequisites of what are the database that it supports, what are the operating systems that it supports, what is the JDK version that you need to have, those kind of information, right? Now, I have not yet installed the entire application. I was just in the middle of installing the database, but I'm almost like 90% completed with the installation. It's just that now I need to select the specific database version and the database related ODBC driver. And then if I go next, it should start the installation. So in this video, I'm going to take you at least to that level where it prompts you to provide the database related information, because database is the most important part of Sterling B2B integrated application. Lot of configuration and settings are stored in database, and it's a database centric application, as we all know. It does lot of online transaction processing, OLTP, and lot of crude related database queries that it fires to the database. Okay. Now, so how did I get started, right? So if I go to my local disk, what I've done is I have downloaded 5261 Sterling B2B integrator media file. So it's a zip file, and I placed it in my local C drive. Along with it, I have also downloaded the 5261 SDK or software development kit. And in addition to that, there are some additional files that you need to have. You need to have the unrestricted policy file. You need to have the database related setup file so that you install the database. For my installation, I've considered Microsoft SQL Server 2008 Enterprise Edition. I have even Oracle as well, but I considered for our tutorial 2008. And once I have downloaded these all files, what I've done is I've taken the first Sterling B2B integrator related zip file. I have unzipped it. And when I unzip this folder, if you see over here, there are certain subfolders within the root folder, right? You have common repo, which also is embedded as a zip file. I have unzipped it. And when I unzipped common repo, it has B2BI repo and global mailbox repo. These are very important. Now, global mailbox is out of scope for our tutorial right now, but B2BI repo is where you have all the artifacts which you need to install as part of the application installation. Now, there's another folder over here, which is very important, which is called installation manager, because before IBM purchased and took over this application when it was with AT&T, there was a Eclipse based UI that we used to use and go next and provide all the relevant information, and it is to install Sterling integrator for us. But IBM, after rebranding it, they introduced this installation manager, or which we call IBM installation manager, which is needed to be used for doing any kind of Sterling B2B installation. So before we even start the installation, what I did, I went into the folder and I see there are set of files for each of the operating system version that this particular version supports. I considered the installation manager setup file for Windows. I unzipped it. And within this unzipped file, you have something called install. So when I click on install, I actually have already installed it before this call. So this is very important. You need to install it, right? And after installation, I let's go back to this installation manager folder, right? The other important thing is you need to ensure that you have the proper uh, JDK. Now 5261 supports IBM JDK. So what I've done is I have unzipped the SDK folder, and when I open this unzipped folder, I have this IBM Java SDK 7, which is the supported JDK version for this particular Sterling B2B integrator version. I have installed it. The third thing is you need to unzip this 2008 server, and then you need to install it the way I have, like I'm just showing, right? So I have already installed it. I haven't created a database within the database server, which I need to do, but I'm just showing you the steps, right? Now, all these things, right? How do you really follow? So for doing that, all you can do is you can maybe quickly open your any browser that you have, and then just type IBM Sterling B2B Integrator 5261 and just enter. Now, if you see over here, downloading and then using release notes. Let's be a little more specific. Let's say I tell as documentation. Okay. And then I click on this link. And if you see over here on the left hand side, you have this option of going into individual version specific documentation. So for us, it is 5.2. And then for my specific scenario, it is 5261. So I scroll down and I'm going to install it in Windows as a non-clustered. Non-clustered means it's a single node installation and not a multi-node installation. So if you see over here, installing an upgrade, right? Right. Now, in this, if you go to any specific, let's say I'm going to install it in a non-cluster installation, right? So you click on this and you check, it has all the information, right? It has all this installation overview, how to prepare your system, right? And then how to configure the database, the system verification steps. So it has all the steps already available in the documentation. Verify you have proper disk space, the JDK version matches, the database version matches correctly or not, right? And then you start the installation, right? Now, if I type IBM B2B Integrator 526.1 compatibility, right? And you go to this link and then you click on system requirements 526 later, and I click on detail system requirements. It's going to open me another page, which is the compatibility, right? Now I select for me my scenario 5261 as the version. And when I select, if you see, there are multiple tabs over here. You can even download it as a PDF for your reference. Now, operating system, which is where based on which operating system you consider, you can go directly to that and see what are the typical operating system that it supports so that you ensure that you have the proper operating system for installation, right? Now, if you see, it's mentioned Windows 7 Enterprise, but I'm pretty sure that you cannot install B2B Integrator on Windows 7 Enterprise. So what I do is if you go on this right hand side and under components, right? This is very important. You see, if I take my mouse over there, it says that if you have Windows 7, you can definitely use Graphical Process Modeler or GPM, which is your business process editor, or you can run map editor, which is the exe file that I was showing in my last tutorial, right? So you can use these two components of B2BI if you have Windows 7. But if I go to the next circle, you see from a server side, right, where you're actually planning to install the B2BI server itself, it doesn't support, including all the other options that you have, right? So you need to ensure that you choose a particular operating system where you have B2BI server support as a component. Now, if I see starting Windows Server 2008 R2 Enterprise Edition, I see that this is where it supports B2BI. It doesn't support the other one, which is not important for us in our tutorial, but B2BI, that is the base component, should be supported. So you need to make sure that you select any operating system which has B2BI as a server component selected, right? So that's very critical. Now, this is how you choose the proper operating system. Second is in the prerequisites, we need to consider the database section, right? So what kind of database, what is the version of the database that B2BI supports, right? So if you see there are multiple DB2 versions that it supports, and you need to ensure same, you need to go back here and see that B2BI is listed as it's supported, right? You have Microsoft SQL Server, different kind of editions, enterprise standard. I've considered enterprise, Oracle. So you need to make sure that you have the proper release, proper version of that particular database installed for your Sterling B2B integrated installation. That's very critical. And then you have some other supported software, hardware, and whatnot, right? So let's say in respect to hardware, right? You need to make sure you have 22 GB free disk space, right? You need to ensure you have at least 4 GB RAM, right? So this kind of some of the hardware related requirements are there which you need to be cognizant about. Now, moving back, as I mentioned that I have installed IBM Installation Manager, right? Now let me open that. That would be our starting point, right? So I go to IBM Installation Manager, right? Now when I open this, it's going to load it. And if you see, it's going to show me a page like this, right? It's an Eclipse based tool. Now, if I click on install, it's going to give me some error. What's the error? If you see over here, it says installation manager cannot find any packages to install. In order to access packages, you must configure a repository connection and ensure that you can access the network or your repository media. So as I mentioned, right, right here, when I unzipped this installation media file, and then when I unzip the common repo, it has this B2BI repo, and within this folder, you have this repository config file, right? You need to make sure that you provide that path to this installation manager. Then only it will allow you, if everything goes good, is going to allow you to the next page for providing additional details. So how do I do it? Let's cancel it. And let's go to File, Preferences. And then if you see over here, I have an option of adding a repository, right? That means I'm telling this particular installation manager from where should it pick up the appropriate installation files that are needed for this to run smoothly, right? Now I click on Add Repository and I browse to that common repo, B2BI repo, and the repository config file. I'm going to link it. Okay. I'm going to click OK. Now I have added the repository config file. Now let me click on test connections, and it says all the selected repositories are connected. That means we are good to go now. I click on OK. And then when I click on install, it's going to automatically now pick up from the config file that I have the proper installation files ready based on the configuration file information that I've given, right? Now I'm going to select this, and then I'm going to click next. Here, this is the typical license information of all the details. Now I click on I accept, go next. You keep it as default as shared resource directory. IBM IM installation manager shared. You keep default, no changes here. Go next. Now you need to create a folder where we are going to install Sterling Integrator. I'll keep it as same like under C. There's a folder that gets created which is IBM, and then there's another subfolder which is SI, right? So let it be. Architecture for this particular OS is 64-bit, so it automatically picked up that. I'm going to keep it as is and click on next. Now this is where you have option of installing only the base product, which is Sterling Integrator. If you are really interested to install Sterling File Gateway, which is the managed file transfer offering that I was talking about, you can certainly select that. Or what happens that these all modules are available as jar files within your installation folder once it's created, and you can install that later as and when needed. So for the time being, I'm going to just select Sterling Integrator and go next. Now, I already mentioned the JDK, right? The IBM JDK, which is very important. You need to ensure that you install that JDK prior to this installation of the application itself. So I'm going to select the folder where I have installed the IBM JDK. I'm going to go into my local disk and go to program files, IBM, and Java, bin, and this should be okay, right? And then click next. Keep it as is, no changes, and then unrestricted JCF file, which I've already saved. Okay, here by default, as I'm installing this on the same operating system, you can keep it as local host, okay, as the IP, or you can put it as 127.0.0.1, which is also typically the IP address of your local host. So you can keep it that way. And then port, usually you can give any port, but you need to make sure that you have additional subsequent ports available from that particular base port. So this port is actually the base port where you're going to install the application, but application itself needed almost like, if I remember clearly, 200 plus ports consecutively from the base port, because there are additional things that run within the application on those ports. So you need to make sure they are free. So typically what I do is I give 10,000, you can give 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, because typically the ports are free unless and until there is something specific that you have already installed within the operating system that is running on those high available ports, right? So I start with 10,000, for example. And now you give a passphrase. This is very important. This passphrase is needed whenever you want to upgrade your existing Sterling Integrator version. Any changes you do, this passphrase is embedded within the configuration. So you need to make sure that you keep a copy of that passphrase handy. So, okay. And then email, you can give your own email address, or you can give her any test email. This is the most important part of selecting the proper database and the relevant details. Now, I have just installed before this tutorial the database, so I haven't configured the database, so I won't be able to proceed further beyond this, which I'm going to share in my next video. But for me, as I have installed SQL Server 2008, I'm going to select that, and then I will not select this one because this is just the node one or the single node cluster. So it's not applicable for me. And then I click on next. Now, when I select SQL Server 2008 and then I click next, it asks me, okay, tell me what is the username of the instance that you want to connect to? What is the password of that SQL Server instance? And then the catalog name, the host where it is running. If the database is running on a different OS, then or a machine, right? You need to give that machine's host and port details, and then you need to add the JDBC driver file, which I'm going to do in my next video. And then once you're given all this information, you have a button called test. So you need to ensure that the test is successful, because unless and until the test is successful, you won't get an option of uh, this installation, right? It's not going to get enabled. As soon as the test is successful, this install button is going to get enabled for you to start the installation. So this is the last part of Sterling B2B installation. I hope this was useful for all of you who are pretty new in respect to at least the administrative part of Sterling B2B integrator. I hope that you should be able to at least speak verbally what are the typical steps that we need to follow to install Sterling B2B integrator. And please let me know in your comments if there are any questions for me that I can address and help you all. Thank you.